The Charlotte Podcast Festival is presented by Blumenthal Performing Arts, the Queen City Podcast Network, Eclecs Creative Agency, and WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the home of acclaimed podcast Charlotte Talks, She Says, The List, Amplifier, Southbound, and FAQ City. Learn more about WFAE and our latest podcast, Work It, at WFAE.org.
Welcome to the Charlotte Podcast Festival. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is the third week, and we have another week to go. So if you haven't already, we've had over 13,000 people register. Make sure you get out there and sign up for any sessions that you want. There's still a few more tomorrow. There's the happy hour this Friday. Next week, the focus is longevity, legal, and monetization. So that's going to be an important one. Make sure you get into those sessions because they're filling up. The Charlotte Podcast Festival is brought to you by our sponsors who we love: WFAE, Queen City Podcast Network, home of the podcast from hell, Blumenthal Performing Arts, and Eclecs Creative Agency. So big thank you and shout out to our partners there. My name is Cale Evans. I am part of Queen City Comedy, in case you didn't know. We got several podcasts. You can go to Queen City Comedy and find those. We also have some workshops, including some coming up this weekend to help podcasters. So go and check that out. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about how to get major PR for your podcast. All right, how to pitch, how to develop a communication strategy. Major PR. If you wanted just a little bit of PR, you're in the wrong session. This is all about major PR. And I'm, of course, not going to be the one to tell you how to do it. We've got some fantastic hosts. We've got Erin Bredeen. She's a CEO and head mermaid of Blue Tide Creative, which is a boutique public relations strategy, content, and branding firm. Erin is a contributing writer and editor for local, regional, national publications. She's been a guest on lots of podcasts, but it was her relationship with her client, Advent Co-working, where she became a podcast host. She's joined by Jamika Witten, a public relations professional and business executive with over 20 years experience working in new media, publishing, brand management, strategic communications. She's owned and operated JSW Media Group, a public relations and brand management firm, since 2006. And Jamika is a freelance writer, lifestyle blogger, and content creator. So we're going to hear from them in just a little bit, and then we're going to allow some time at the end for Q&A. The questions, the queue of yours, of the Q&A is going to come from you. It's going to be in the chat. So everybody, let's practice the chat. If you'll notice down at the bottom, you see a chat button. If you click that, the chat window will pop up. Go in and just tell us who you are, where you're dialing in from. That's going to be the way that you ask questions throughout, but we will save some time at the end for some questions. And all of the sessions for the Charlotte Podcast Festival will be recorded, and you will get a link towards the end of the month. So even though I encourage you to take some good notes, you will also get a full description, a full video of all this. So without any further ado, I would like to turn it over to our panelists, Erin and Jamika. Erin and Jamika, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hi. You know, it's so funny. Always, whenever someone introduces me and I hear it's like some of my bio, I'm like, who is that? That person sounds kind of cool. So thank you.
Mine too. I was like, when do I have time? What's this?
Like, what in the world? But happy to be here. So excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited for all of you who are joining us live right now, for all of you who will be seeing this afterwards on the replay. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be with Jamika and I, to be a part of the Charlotte Podcast Festival. We really appreciate it. Again, use the chat. Cale is going to be helping us at the end with Q&A. We're going to go through our presentation first because some of your questions might be answered during that time. So we're going to just jump on in. So I know, as Jamika said, when you hear your bio back, you're kind of like, huh, yeah. That was pretty cool. But just a little bit more about me, and Jamaica will give you a little bit more about herself and our experiences with podcasting and PR so that we can then go into this presentation and you understand where we're coming from. Again, I'm Erin Breeden. Great to meet you all. And Kale kind of mentioned that I own my own business, and through a client of mine, Advent Coworking, kind of set me on my journey into podcasting. So first and foremost, I consider myself a storyteller, whether that is for my clients, whether that is for some publications that I write for. Actually, in a previous life, I was a editor and chief of a bridal magazine. Rest in peace. It was lovely while it was alive. But kind of my foray into podcasting happened when I started working with Blue Tie created my company to working with Advent Coworking. Advent Coworking is here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it had the first available podcast space for podcasters. It was rent by the hour. So we saw a lot of podcasts come through here. And as I started working with them, I became really interested in podcasting and helped with their podcasting program, helped them launch a podcast university. But then one day they looked and they were like, we should probably have a podcast. And I was like, that's absolutely a great idea. It needs to be about entrepreneurs. We need to do it like this. And they're like, you're going to host it. So I've been hosting it now for 2 years. We've taken a break. We're going to come back in the new year. But it's just, I've fallen in love with the medium. It's a great way, again, to tell stories, to connect to people. And so that's kind of just how I got into podcasting through actually my PR career. So Jamaica.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. Again, so nice to see everybody. Nice to be here. This is so exciting. Ben, as was mentioned earlier, I have owned and operated JSW Media Group, which is a brand management firm and boutique PR agency for a long time, since 2006. And how I got into, podcasting was really trying to expand my clients' brands. So that's how it really came about. I've always been interested in new media platforms whenever they pop up. And I'll give you guys this one. I used to, before there was official podcasting, I used to host an online radio show in like the early 2000s. So I've had a lot of experience kind of jumping on and getting familiar with that medium. So got into specifically podcasting when a client of mine, Keith Cradle, who is also a business partner, decided he wanted to do a podcast about drinking and talking about really cool things culturally and artistically. So that is actually called Crafted with Cradle. And that's how I got the entree into this world as it is now. I do everything from booking, PR, producing, co-producing, content creation, figuring out topics, the whole nine. I have like this hat and wear a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's always fun. But yeah, my experience also, I used to be on the other side. I was a journalist. I still consider myself a pretend journalist from time to time. So I have been on the other side as well as on the PR end. And I just like building brands from the ground up. That's fun for me. Taking a client, figuring out their story, telling the story the right way, building the brand, expanding it, and getting everybody to know about it. So in a nutshell, that's the background.
Awesome. And for everyone here, Jamaica and I are actually very dear friends and colleagues. We work together and are working together with clients. So you will notice we probably have a little bit of banter and yeah, girl, like, that's right. That's just our style. But so now we've kind of given you an overview of our experiences with, how we got into podcasting, what we're currently doing. I think the best way to start this is to kind of jump in and define what public relations is. And I think there's a confusion of what PR does, and it kind of gets lumped in with like marketing and promotions and advertising. Those things are kind of a separate entity. Public relations, and Jamaica, you jump into with this, to me is first and foremost is the last word, it's relations. It's building relationships. And that includes with your clients, with potential media, and that can be anybody from print to digital to, TV to radio to other podcasts that you want to maybe partner with or work with. It's building relationships to tell your story. People sometimes think that PR is very salesy. Good PR can lead to sales, but PR is to get you in front of a potential audience or consumer that you want, in this case, to listen to your podcast, potentially people who you want to sponsor your podcast. It can lead to that, but PR is truly about figuring out your story and getting it out there in a controlled way.
Absolutely. I think it's always easier when defining PR, to say what PR is not. PR is not necessarily marketing. I guess a good way to put it is it's all in this big house, right? But PR is a part of one of those rooms. It's not the full house is communications and strategic communications. And then you have different rooms. So you have PR, you have marketing, you have promotions, you have strategic, other types of strategic communications. Social media can be thrown in there as a tactic and a tool. But PR is much more than just getting your name in the media. It's the full spectrum, right? So it's really building your story, figuring out your angles, and showing people how it's almost answering a question for folks, or answering a problem, if that makes sense. If we're going to talk about it from the business standpoint, what's an issue out there, and how is your podcast or your brand or your personality filling in
Jamaica?
that? Yes.
I think Jamaica has frozen right now. Oh, there she's back.
Oh, no. I froze. What part did you not hear?
Just keep going.
Okay. Somebody said they heard it all, so I'm not sure.
Then maybe it's my end. Okay, keep going. Sorry,
well,
guys.
That's okay. But I want to make sure you hear too, because you're my friend. You're welcome. That goes the banter that we were talking about. We'll just kind of squirrel from time to time, but it's entertaining and it's interesting, I promise. So yes, so it's just a matter of knowing what PR isn't and building upon that. So look at PR more holistically, and not just, I want to get on Oprah. I know that's a dated reference, but that's something that I always hear from clients. They're like, I want to get on Wendy Williams tomorrow. I want to be in the New York Times. I want to do this, that, and the other. And that doesn't necessarily happen overnight. And just because you really, really want it to, doesn't mean it's going to happen. You have to put the work in.
Yeah, and I think to what Jamaica was saying is, I think one of the first things that anyone needs to know about PR is sometimes you have to, start small, to then get the bigger ones. And as she was saying, a word over and over again that Jamaica said was strategy. And this is something that we're going to talk about a little bit more, but, having some sort of strategy, and especially with your podcast, knowing who you are, what the podcast is about, the guests that you're targeting, the audience that you want, will really help you get a strategy for then when you want to get out in the media. And, there are opportunities where, as we were saying, you want to get on Oprah. We love Oprah. Always love Oprah. Or different shows, or you want to get on another larger podcast, or you want to get on, into Forbes or Inc. or Business or something, depending on what your specialty is, that sometimes you've got to start with the strategy and go in bits and pieces. I think especially with podcasting, something that's kind of a false idea is, and I'll say it's the movie. I love it, Field of Dreams, but I think if you build it, they will come. Doesn't always apply to things. I think, there's if I have this podcast, I'm going to get all these listeners, and it's going to be great, and I'm going to make money. And that's not the case, because as we've seen, there's about 1 million different podcasts, almost 1 million podcasts on iTunes right now. There is a ton, there's a lot of noise. If you're just going out and you're like, they're going to love me. And I think it's, you see like a Joe Rogan, or you see, even My Favorite Murder, or some of these other, like Steve Smith just came out with a podcast. these are people that already have connections and already are in the business. So that's not necessarily the right thing to measure your level of success and brand awareness against. But I will say, since I said Field of Dreams, I have to tell you the movie that you should be paying attention to. It's one I haven't seen in a while. I talk about movies all the time.
Yes.
But is from Jerry Maguire. And you're probably thinking about that one quote about show me the money. That is the wrong quote for this session. The right quote is help me help you.
Absolutely. And I think it's also worthy to note that it's a process, y'all. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to put in the work. It's not just, you can have a great product and you can have a great idea, but it's taking the idea to the finish line. And that's sometimes where people get a little hemmed up and a little muddled on the process and the strategy around that. But that's why we're here. We're talking it out. We're here to encourage and help you from point A to point B. So I guess with that said, we also want to, although we just said that, we want you to be the best you can be and work towards it. Sometimes PR is not about you. It's not all about you.
Yes, I'll put the exclamation next to that one. I know that's a hard thing for everyone to hear, but it's true. It's not about you.
It's definitely about your audience and your market. And I think and I know there were other sessions that talked about defining your target market. Joni had a great one yesterday talking about marketing and really drilling that down and figuring out who your audience is. And that's so important because with PR, you have to reach the right people. You can't just throw a wide net, throw spaghetti on the wall and hope for the best. You really need, it's that S word again, right? That strategy. That strategic marketing, that strategic target market, and figuring out what your audience likes, what they want to hear, but still staying true and authentic to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I saw a question pop up and it kind of ties in with what I was about to say. So I'm going to say this about the audience, how do you know the audience? So for example, the Advent Co-working podcast, when we started it, we knew we wanted it to be about entrepreneurs, small business owners, startups, solopreneurs, and really talking about the good, the bad, the ugly. We use sometimes a little more choice language than that, but it's noon on a Wednesday, so we're keeping it like PG in here, but about the mistakes and the falls and the resurrections at times of business. And, with our tagline it's a podcast for people who not only think outside the box, but who redefine it. And so like Jamaica was saying with audience, and the question that we just got of how to find your audience is really think about who is interested. If you have a podcast about, I'll just think about one about, an apocalyptic story about zombies. Who's going to be somebody that's interested in that? It's going to be science fiction people. It's going to be movie buffs. It's going to be horror genre fans. You're going to have to sit there and think about your audience. And then, as Jamaica was saying, there's strategy in place. And then when you start talking about, I'm going to pitch this and I want people to know about this podcast, make sure it's publications and entities that go with that, that it's not, you're pitching a business publication and you're talking about zombies. What you can do is once you start to build up and you get sponsorship, then you can pitch the business publication and tell them, I have this podcast about zombies, but also because of it and my following, and here's my numbers, I was able to get sponsorship from, the makeup company that makes fake blood or something like that. And you can talk about your story about success, and then you can get into business publications. But again, it goes back to strategy and to knowing your target. And this kind of goes into something that we actually were just talking about offline before everybody came on, was there is a tendency of people, if they don't have PR professionals or they don't have a strategy, to use a PR newswire. And I'm not saying those are a bad thing. Those have their time and place, but sometimes send it in a blanket press release of, hey, my zombie apocalyptic podcast is here, you need it. And they send it to 30,000 outlets, and which includes, reporters, journalists, whatever. I send it to 30,000 people, 30,000, sets of eyes around it. But how many hits did you get? How did you get any news from it? Or did you just, waste your time and spam someone's inbox?
Absolutely. And that actually goes into how to pitch and how to follow up and how to figure out who needs your news or who's interested. And this may sound harsh, but not everybody's going to care about your podcast, unfortunately. So finding the right people, to Erin's point, who will care and that it makes sense for them. Because at the end of the day, think about it. Reporters, journalists, bloggers, everybody is super busy. And everybody is getting inundated with all of this information in their email all the time. The phone is ringing off the hook, the emails are coming in, the DMs are coming in, and everybody has the best story. You know, everybody's like, my podcast is the best one. You're going to want to write about it. I'm going to make $1 million one day, or I'm just the coolest person on the planet. And although you probably are, I am not disputing that, the person on the other end may not see it that way if you don't present it in the correct format or in the correct way, or that's something that, or bring them something that's applicable to them and their outlet that they work for. So, you know, one thing that we talked about, and Erin, we can go into this in more detail, is that journalists are people.
Yes.
Right? They are people. So you have to think about the person and personalizing things that you are sending out. For instance, for the wire thing, you're sending it to 30,000 people, but what is that really doing, as opposed to researching what reporters are writing about what and how it is applicable to your particular topic, and then creating pitches that go along with that so that it makes it more attractive for people to, you know, reporters and journalists, they want to write about things. They want new ideas. They need topics. So I feel like I've been talking. Please jump in, Erin.
No, it was good. I was listening to everything you were saying. But like Jamika was saying, and kind of going back to the help me, help you, you know, when you know of like, okay, well, these are my publications, and these are the online outlets, or this is the program, or however you want to do it, whatever works best for you that you want to pitch and go after, whatever works for your podcast and what you're doing, you know, help them. But, you know, like, get a pitch where you look, I always say this because I think people can pitch themselves. I mean, I know I'm, as a PR person, I'm not supposed to say that because we're here to help, but, you know, if you have a pitch and you look and there's a publication and there is, you know, a reporter that is covering exactly the topic that you are doing your podcast on, and you're like, this is a great fit, you know, they usually have online, they'll have like a link. Usually it's their byline. You can click on their byline and it'll take you either to a direct email link or their bio, where it'll have their email address, and you can send it to them directly and be like, hey, you know, Jamika, I loved what you wrote about last week. I just thought you'd be interested to see that I'm doing this podcast and just had this guest on who covered that exact same topic. You know, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. Is, you know, covering a podcast or using me as a source sometime, or maybe some of my, you know, guests as a source for things you're working on, an option. I just wanted to introduce myself. And it's very simple like that. And, you know, then you're showing that you're a resource for them, because like Jamika said, they want to write, they want to cover stories, you know, especially now people want to have that stories other than the gloom and doom that we're having for the non-Americans out there, that we're having in America currently. But, you know, they want to have these success stories, and they do want to be supportive. You know, I think a big thing is people are like, the media hates me. And it's like, the media doesn't hate you. They just don't know who you are.
Absolutely. And I think that another along those lines is also read the room. Understand what's going on currently. If there is some kind of major happening and there's breaking news and you're talking about your podcast about pets, but there's just been a big, you know, a school bombing or something has happened, people are probably not paying attention to your email right then. It doesn't mean that they don't like you. It doesn't mean that they won't talk about you or write about you eventually. It just means that there are other things that are going on that may take precedence at the moment. So really understand what's going on, even in the world. Read the paper, watch the news, watch social media, interact on social to see what's really going on, because you can also use those ideas to help pitch. Because if something is timely that's happening, just something that is applicable to what your topic is, then you can actually pitch yourself as a thought leader or an expert. Or, if you have, to use the zombie example, if you have, it's always
good.
Zombies are always good. I mean, you can always use zombies. So if you have a podcast about zombies and there's this new, well, I won't use virus because that's, yeah. So if something, it's too soon. But if there's something that happens where like there is a reenactment for Halloween where there's a bunch of zombies coming out, then you can pitch to local outlets and national that your podcast talks about that, and you can kind of fit it in. So, just get creative with your angles, get creative with your pitches, and keep going. And rejection is going to happen, but keep going, because somebody's going to say yes eventually, especially if it's well thought out and carefully and intentionally done.
Absolutely. And I would say, it's not bad to follow up, but don't follow up every day. Again, read the room. If things are happening, I always use it rule of thumb. If I haven't heard back in maybe like a week, then I follow up, and I would say 9 times out of 10, when I followed up, I got a response back, and it was like, yeah, thank you so much for following back up. I put this in my, folder to contact later, but something happened and I couldn't get to you. I definitely want to cover this. How do I get in touch with you or your client? Like it happens, but also again, like we've been talking about, whether it's the other end of the email or the other end of the phone line, however you're reaching out, remember they're people first. It's a person that you're talking to and trying to reach out to, and the world is crazy. And so sometimes a little bit of grace can go a long way.
Yes, definitely. We want to make sure that it's humans talking to humans. So remember that part. And also, yeah, the follow-up is definitely good. Just don't harass people, and it's going to be, you'll be okay. I promise you will. And I guess we're kind of going into, with that, make sure you're sending them something worthwhile, which means you actually have to know what you're talking about. You see, I didn't say it. I was going to say.
We had another word on the notes that we made. I was like, keep it PG. But yes, know your stuff, know what you're talking about. As Jamaica's already talked about, if you're able to use your podcast and show that you are a thought leader, that you not only yourself as a resource, can be a resource, or that your guests can be resources, or there's maybe a really interesting topic you had and you're like, hey, here's this episode. I don't know if you knew about, XYZ and this bill that's being passed, or, something like that. Like this could really have an implication on this. Just wanted to share it with you. It could turn into a story for them, and you were the person that gave it to them. So the more that you know and about your stuff, watched it there. The more, because they'll see right through you if you don't know. I mean, and to go back, I always use Advent because I'm a podcast host of that, but I've had my business for 4.5 years. So I was out for almost 3 years doing my business before I was asked to be the host. And, if I didn't know about the ins and outs of, LLC, S Corp, what it was like to find a CPA, what it was like to get that first client that backfired, and talking about how you can't put all your eggs in one basket, and you have to make sure that, you're reaching out to different potential clients or people, I don't think I would be as strong of a host, or be able to ask some of the questions to the guests, because I had that firsthand knowledge already, and I was able to ask pointed questions.
Mm-hmm. It's that authenticity that we talked about. So if you know what you're talking about, then number one, your podcast will be better because the information will flow. You know it. You don't have to pretend, so to speak, or study a lot because you already know the material. But it's also important from a PR standpoint, because you want to be able to answer questions effectively and truthfully, and know what you're talking about when people hit you up for an interview, for to write an op-ed piece on something, to go on someone's morning show, to even be on someone else's podcast. You want to present yourself in the best way possible. And so it's always better if you're actually talking about something that you're passionate about, that you know inside and out. And if you want to do a pet podcast, you don't have to be a veterinarian, but at least like pets, at least have a dog, something. I get a lot of clients sometimes or potential clients who hit me up and they're just like, I want to be X, Y, and Z. That's great. But do you have anything to back that up? Only because number one is the authenticity, but it's also the respectability factor, right? You want people to respect what you do and that you have the actual knowledge. Why are people listening to you? Why are they interested in what you have to say? You got to have some background. You got to have some experience. Even if it's a personal experience, it doesn't have to be school. It doesn't have to be training, but there has to be some kind of a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as she was saying, that just goes to show the value of your podcast. And it's not only value to, when you're trying to expand your reach and announce your brand on, through, different publications or other podcasts or things like that, but it's showing your value to your audience because, a goal is to always keep audience growth, like to keep it growing and keep it evolving and having people share it with their friends, bring it on. So, I think that just goes into value and you have to have passion about it too. Jamaica was saying, I've been in touch with and worked with people who had a brilliant idea, but they didn't necessarily have the passion for it. They just knew it was going to be something that would make them money or give them a modicum of fame or recognition. And that, as I've noticed, and I'm sure Jamaica can attest to, tends to be seen, and then it kind of ruins opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Good.
So I was going to say, I know a lot of people probably are on here are like, that's great, Erin and Jamaica, but like, how do I launch? How do I do PR strategies? So, I think I'm going to kind of interview you for a second, Jamaica.
Okay. I'm ready.
I know you are. So with Crafted with Cradle, with the podcast that you work on with Keith Cradle, which is brilliant if anybody's really interested in art and really valuable conversation and also cocktails.
Yes,
it's a great podcast.
Lots of cocktails.
I've been on it before. I had cocktails. It was great. So when you and Keith got this idea, walk them through of people who either have a podcast or are thinking about a podcast, kind of the strategy and the plan that you had before launching the podcast and before contacting media. What was your process?
Okay. It's always interesting working with folks that you admire and you're friends with, because we came up with the idea over cocktails. Funny that. We actually also do a video podcast together called Sips and Tips. So it's sort of morphed. I was just like, when Keith came to me with Crafted with Cradle, I'm like, oh, that's perfect, because we know that drinks and information work because we've already done that. No, but seriously, it was all about the expertise for us, because we looked at, Keith was like, I really want to do this. I want to talk to people in Charlotte who are movers and shakers, who are really doing things in the arts and the cultural arts community, but I don't want it to be stuffy. I don't want it to be, your average thing that everybody's been doing, want it to be different. How do we create something different? So obviously, we put the cocktails aspect in there. And of course, you throw in the creativity of our executive producer, Chuck Holliday, who's also been in some of these sessions. Keith has also been in some of these sessions. I think he has another session. We just got everybody all together. It's very incestuous. We're all just like all together. But, we sat down and we mapped it out. We said, who do we want to talk to? And for me, on the PR side, I made sure that we got guests that had their own following and their own expertise. We weren't just talking to just random folks. It was very strategic because we knew in the beginning, in order to get the viewership up, we needed to reach folks who, I mean, you know, it's a brand new podcast. So we had to rely on the host and his expertise and his visibility in the community to bring people in. We had to rely on our various guests as well. And then, you know, making sure that the production was clear and looked good. So, you know, as we put that first episode out there, just really pushing it to the Charlotte market. We started local and then kind of expanded. But my PR tactic with Crafted with Cradle specifically, and with some others that I've done with clients, has been using the host and their popularity and then building around that. So as much, getting them as much individual PR as possible, and then it helps with the entire podcast because people are like, who is this person and what are they doing? And so then we're able to present it that way, as well as, you know, reaching out to various companies and seeing who may want to send product or endorse, or, you know, doing on location stuff sometimes, so that we're highlighting various places within the Charlotte area. So, you know, it was a little bit of everything. You know, it was strong social media. It was reaching out to the media once we had something, and just letting people know. That's the biggest thing, is just strategically letting people know and using the right folks to help tell and expand the story. So Erin.
Yes.
Well, no, you had a follow-up. Did you have a follow-up question for me?
Oh, no, I was going to say that you're brilliant, but you can ask me your question now.
Oh my goodness, and you are too, and completely fabulous. Okay, sorry y'all, we get into our love fest from time to time, but and it's all love, it's all true. Okay. So with Advent, you talked about that a little bit, but let's talk about you as the host and how, especially with you doing double duty, like making sure that like you're building the brand, you are doing the communications, and you're hosting and helping to produce. Like, that's a lot. So tell us a little bit about that process and specifically how you reached out to media with that.
Yeah, and that's when you put it that way, I'm like, oh yeah, there was a lot. So for the podcast, I am very involved with it. Not only the host, I book clients, I come up with questions, I came up with the tagline, wrote intros, outros, and I assist with editing it as well. I do have a phenomenal producer here locally, one of the sponsors, Queen City Podcast Network, Brian Baltashevitz, who has been a speaker prior sessions. It is really a family affair here in Charlotte with this. And he's speaking again next week, I know, on a few things. But, you know, finding a producer, because even though I know how to work the board, I knew with everything else I was doing, I didn't want to be the person working the tech. So getting a producer in place was really crucial for me. You know, it was interesting, as you said earlier, wearing lots of hats. Of where, you know, I had to be strategic about the questions that I asked, the people that were on, you know, just kind of how to promote it, how to pitch it to the media. I also had to be very careful because one of my passions is freelance writing. So I had to make sure I wasn't using contacts that I have on a personal level versus contacts that I have on a professional level. So it's a very precarious spot, but I think we made it work really well because, you know, like you said, you know, coming up with a strategy, you know, when I was asked to do it, there was no kind of overarching theme of what the podcast was going to be about. We just wanted a podcast. And I sit there and look around and be like, okay, well, coming from a co-working space, what's really going to be appropriate? And I was like, it's going to be talking about entrepreneurs. It's going to be talking about small businesses. It's going to be talking about people who are thinking about making the jump from full-time to working for themselves. Maybe they have, you know, they've got two companies going on at once before they make the decision. So that's who I knew we needed to target. And so then kind of figuring out the scope of what it was all going to be about, and then really going after, and you nailed this, of like looking at like who the guests were, especially as we were starting out. I wanted to get guests that have a reputation for being incredible business leaders and thought leaders that had a large following. And and, kind of focusing on that, because then they could do cross promotional. So, it was me, not only myself using my connections and my following, but then as Advent using our connections, our following. And then we had these incredible guests that we worked with that then shared it to their, whether it was on social media, if they did newsletters, it was on a news blast of like, check me out, check us out where we're out next. But again, of just like, it was very strategic in thinking about, okay, we've got to build the foundation first. What is the podcast about? Who are the people who are really going to listen to it? Who are the quality of guests that we want to have? And then once I had that and had a few, we did like a lead up to the launch as well. And then once we had that, really starting to make sure that it got in front of like different media so people could see it. And our podcast has been on a couple of ranking lists and things like that about podcasts to listen to on business. And then I've been, from that, pulled out as somebody who is a resource for small businesses and startups. So it just turned into this really beautiful thing, but it started with, we had to know who we were first before we could go out. And then when I felt comfortable really not going out to the media and being like, this is who we are, this is what we've done. We had a couple episodes in the can already that were already released. We had certain guests that we could back it up of, this is the caliber of people that we're talking to. And it really just, I think, helped us that way of just, again, strategy and really looking at what we're doing.
I think that is definitely the way to go. Now, I do think that, we could sit here and talk forever. However, I think that it's probably time to open it up for a Q&A. Kale, are we ready for a Q&A?
Oh yeah, there's lots of great Q's already in there waiting for your A's. So yes, please, in the chat, go ahead and put any questions that haven't been answered for Aaron and Jamaica. We'll get to as many of those as we can while we have time. And meanwhile, I pulled a couple that have been coming in so we can get started. This is from Alyssa, a great question that I know came out of our happy hour last week. How do you get an invitation or access to a press junket? They need to provide content.
It does. I think that you got to stay the course and be as notable in your own area as possible, and just kind of it's almost like that check mark on Twitter or Instagram, right? Everybody wants to be verified and you're trying to make it happen, but sometimes it just happens, right? So I think that if you stay the course and you showcase what you can do and you start networking with the right people and with the right media and with the right just folks in the industry, then eventually it will happen, but you have to put it out there first, and you have to have a long-standing reputation and a lot of background. Does that make sense, Aaron? Yeah,
I agree with that. Junkets are hard because the people that are involved with that are so high profile. So the people who are involved are going to be very limiting of who's there. It's really crucial. Like Jamaica was saying, get the information out, really start establishing yourself as a professional. Also, if you're doing the podcast and along with a blog, have that together if you're trying to figure out how to get more things. But as she was saying, networking is going to be crucial, especially with the gatekeepers. There are, for those, it is either people's managers, it is certain PR professionals. You're not necessarily going to go to the top, but you might be able to find like an account coordinator that works with them and kind of just get your foot in the door and really build it up. Because again, like we've been talking about, those people who are the gatekeepers, you got to remember how many emails and calls they're getting daily and how many times they're being tagged on social media or things like that. So you've got to, again, just keep putting out a quality product and keep making, keep touching base and like touch points and making sure they know that you're there.
Yeah, and find, and to Aaron's point, find the right gatekeepers. So do your research and figure out what PR agencies are representing these folks and putting the junkets together.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to meet the baby. Can you get us someone who can introduce us to the baby?
It's just the baby. Yeah. The baby has.
That's all right.
Technically, yes.
We'll take that answer offline. So another question, several about templates for reaching out to journalists and some specifics. Do you have some suggestions for resources for that type of things? A recommended form or structure for PR messages?
Well, I won't speak for Erin, but I think we're on the same page with this. It's highly personalized because yes, you can have like a general template, but you're going to want to massage that a little bit for each outlet and for each person. So it's really about making sure you have the who, what, when, and where and why in there. So you have all of your 5 W's in that email, but you also want to make sure you know who you're talking to. And it's always good to refer back to something that they've written or produced lately. So it shows that you actually pay attention and you're not just hitting them up out of the blue. And make sure you have all of the pertinent contact information. And we didn't talk about this, but having your media kit together or something that you can link to. Don't send large attachments because we don't trust people. So we don't want anybody to send a virus or something crazy. So send links to your media kit that should be on your website or any kind of press release or media alert, put it in the body of the email. But yeah, those, I think there's no true template. You can Google a bunch of, things to get some ideas, but take the time to structure your letters or your emails. It'll be worth it in the end, but you don't have to make them long because people are not going to read past the first paragraph anyway.
Yeah, and I would say if you're looking for templates, HubSpot or Sprout Social or one of those groups might have links and opportunity, or so might like a PR essay or whatever PR organization, depending on who's here, because I know we have some folks in some different countries. And I agree with that. And it's true, something that we didn't touch base on, but that goes in with like templates. I agree there's not a set template for it. It needs to be personalized. Again, the who, what, when, where, why, how, you can help them as a reporter. And then also, getting your podcast up and running, getting the social medias up and running. I really do also kind of just touched on this is have a website and have information about you on there, have your links to your episodes. If you have the liner notes or the episode notes that you want to expand upon. And it's also a great place if you want to have a link for an electronic media kit, which will show, as you're growing your audience numbers, who your audience is, and if you look into sponsorships too, it's an opportunity there to put in your pricing.
Yeah. And just so you know, a media kit generally would have your headshots for the host, a fact sheet, any recent press links.
Oh, that's great.
All your social media contact, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Nikki asked how long before a launch you should reach out to journalists, but there's a lot of questions about the launch in particular. What, if anything, would you do differently when you don't have a success story or a lot yet because you haven't started producing yet?
I'm trying to get all the parts of that question.
I know it's like so many different layers to that. To clarify, so are you asking about if you don't have anything, but you're trying to tell the media about your launch?
Yeah, exactly that.
You have to have something.
You have to have something. Yeah.
Yes.
Even if it's, you've got 3 episodes produced that are in the can that haven't been launched yet on, iTunes or Spotify or even on your website, like maybe if you wanted to give a teaser, you can, but unless you've got something already, and unless you are bringing in a huge guest, like if you have a whale or a whale of a guest, or you have a lot of experience and people know you, that's going to be really hard to do a launch without a product.
Can you define whale just briefly?
Oh, whale is like, like Moby Dick, like the big whale.
The big get.
The big get, like who's your, did you get Oprah?
To refine the
Right.
question then, if I have an event like a launch or a special guest, how much notice should I give the media before that event?
Oh, you should start. I always give at minimum a 3-month window to start building. And then you need to do follow-ups closer to. So it's like you send out the initial press release with the date or even a save the date or something like that. And then sending media alerts closer to the time for the actual, if it's a physical launch or a physical event, or even if it's an online event. At minimum, I would say, 2 weeks to get on for broadcast. And then, if you want something in print, it's a longer lead time. So, folks are putting together their print publications now for what, like February?
February. Yeah, they're already well into 2021 right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, to reiterate what Jamaica was saying, like if you are planning a launch and you know that it is going to be March 22nd and you are going to do not only launch 3 episodes, you're going to do a live recording, with so-and-so, you're going to want to start. Yeah. If you want print, because usually it's, if it's online, they can pretty much, it's immediate. They can put it online. If you want to be in a glossy or newspaper, that has a longer lead time usually. Depending on what's going on, especially for an event. Because if there's an event, newspapers are a great example. They've got to make sure they have a photographer who's there. They have a reporter who's there. It's just a lot of, on their part, logistical planning in addition to your own planning.
Great. And Walter asked, to switch topics, what should you look for if you're picking a PR specialist to work with?
Reputation, experience. Don't be afraid to ask to talk to their current clients to see how they feel. References are good. Check out what placements they've actually had. Ask for, where have your clients been featured in? And experience is definitely there. And just, and it's also about relationship in the feel. How do you feel with this person? Do you trust them? Because you have to trust your PR professional.
Yeah. And I think to go along with that, a red flag that I've seen come up lately when I've kind of been brought in to help situations that have happened, that sometimes people who are really skilled at social media will tout themselves as being a PR specialist because, they can get you, clicks and, likes and engagement and all this stuff, but that's very, very different. And I've watched people like have bad experiences because they listen to somebody who is social media savvy, who not necessarily relationship savvy when it came to the gatekeepers.
Yeah. Two completely different things.
Yeah. And so just like in any job interview, before you sign on that dotted line and commit, actually put them through, the ringer, give them an interview and, get references, check their, their placements. Absolutely agree with that, what Jamaica said.
And this is an unpopular one. If their prices are too low, run, because they are not at market rate, which means that they don't have the experience where they really should be. And I'm not talking about those just starting out and trying to, kind of get there. But if they're like a professional, but the rates seem really low and they feel, and if they can say, hey, I'll guarantee you.
Yeah, never with
placement.
A guarantee.
No, run, because PR is not guaranteed. We put people in the position for folks to take notice, but the only thing that's guaranteed is paid advertising. That's the difference between paid media and earned media. Earned is, you get that write-up, you get that editorial, you get that broadcast spot, you get that interview on the radio. That's earned. You paying for it, that's advertising and marketing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I saw a comment from Ksenia of you get what you pay for. That's true.
Great. Elizabeth asked, I think when you were talking about how do you communicate with the reporters and the making sure you have the right outlet? Are there any sources that you can recommend? She said years ago I was part of a national office that used Barron's. But any sources if I'm looking to find who to reach out to, what types of outlets I should be targeting? Is there a source you recommend?
I know.
There's so many. I mean, there are a lot of expensive, expensive services that you can subscribe to, but there is nothing like. I was raised on the whole old-fashioned outreach, so I do a lot of hardcore research on who I should reach out to, and I do it by hand, or someone on the team actually will go and do that research. But it's trying to find the right people, it's just there's no quick answer. You have to figure out what outlets you want to reach out to and do the research and figure out what reporters and what freelancers. Don't forget about freelancers and bloggers and that type too.
Yeah, and to go along with that is, there's, you're talking about Barron's, there's, what is there? There's Metwater, there's a whole bunch of other ones that are out there. But the problem that I think that we don't talk about enough is how quickly, like there's just overturning of talent. Like you could be like, oh, this is, I just spent $3,000 on this software that's going to tell me all these, contacts and things that I need. And then the first pitch you send out to that person, you get the out of office, or you get they no longer work here anymore. So if you do a service, you also still at the same time have to do the follow-up and the research yourself. I'm same as Jamaica. I'm a big researcher. As soon as I know what my client is, I create a specific media list for each of them, where I'm like, okay, you're in real estate, you need business, you need finance, things like this. But if you're doing it yourself, you can use different services like that. There are a bunch out there and they're at different price points and all are pretty good. But also please keep in mind that, especially now with kind of the climate of how things are, a person can be the perfect contact for you, and then they can the next week be gone. So don't always rely on the services. Do some of the follow-up yourself.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of that, Anne asked to clarify, do you reach out to editors or reporters directly? Who's making the decision? Who's the right first contact?
It depends, actually. If like in my experience, if you know that a reporter is working on something specific, then you reach out to that reporter. But if you have a good relationship or have built a relationship with the editor, who's going to be, but it has to be like the managing editor or someone who's actually, or an assignment editor who's going to actually get the stories out there. It also depends on the size of the platform and the outlet too.
Exactly. Because if you're going New York Times, a bigger publication, and you go for the editor, you're probably not going to hear back. So I think it's good if, smaller ones, if you can do like the specific, like the features editor or the news editor, that works. But always kind of look at the stories are going to be the big thing, is just, look at, depending on the outlet, the past 3 days of stories. Or if you're in a specific thing, click the business section and see what's been covered. If you're in, arts and culture, click that section and see what's being covered and who the writers are. Because that'll just save you some time and effort. Because, again, the bigger the publication, the less likely you're going to hear from an editor.
All right. Well, there's tons more questions, more than we can get to, but you are available for questions after. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing as we share your contact information here with everybody?
No, I just thank you all again for your time today. Please reach out to us. This is stuff we love to talk about. It's our everyday life, and just know that you can do this. Like if you want to reach out and pitch the media, know your stuff, take baby steps, and then I look forward to seeing you all on bigger platforms.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out whenever. It has been a pleasure. I always enjoy presenting and hanging out online and in person with my friend Erin. And if you need us, we are here. And follow us on social and hit us up on the website, email us, let us know what you need. And hopefully this was useful.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.
That's an adorable picture of the both of you.
We had to do it. We had to be on brand.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's give it up for Erin and Jamika. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your talent, your expertise with us. And thank you to everybody who joined the Charlotte Podcast Festival. We got lots more to happen this week and next week, so make sure you sign up. I think Alyssa shared in the chat the Facebook link. So last week we created a Facebook group so that we could all network and connect with each other. There's a way to save the chat. So if you go to the ellipses next to file in the chat, you can actually save this chat so you can get all the great links and comments and everything that people have been sharing throughout. The recording will come out later this month. You will also get a short survey. So if you would take a chance to fill that out. This is all listener and viewer sponsored. So you can buy one of these great t-shirts on the website. And that goes to help us make sure that these sessions are free in the future. All of our sessions are free. This I just learned that this festival was voted one of the best podcast festivals of the year. And it's not even half over yet. And it's all because of you. So hopefully I'll see everybody at the happy hour this Friday. And thanks again to Erin and Jamika.